So welcome back to another Explain Yourself episode. We're still at the Ecological Society of America meeting, and I'm here with my friend Kaylee Arnold from the University of Georgia Odom School of Ecology. So hi, thanks for coming to do this with us.
Hi.
And we actually met each other at ComSciCon earlier in the summer and then didn't have a chance to do this then, but here we are again because ecologists like to have fun and hang out together, so yay! So my first question for you is, can you give us like the elevator pitch for your current research?
Sure. So I'm a disease ecologist, and so I study insects that spread disease. I work in Panama, and I look at the gut bacteria that are found in insects that spread Chagas disease.
Okay, so, and can you tell us a little bit more about what Chagas disease is?
Sure. So Chagas disease is mostly found throughout Latin America. It is caused by a parasite. And then so you have kissing bugs, as commonly known as. And so the infected kissing bug will bite a human, drink their blood, and then they will defecate on the human, and then the parasite can go into the bloodstream. And then so human is infected with Chagas disease.
Great. So first, that's a little different than like if we think about parasites entering humans from other biting insects like a mosquito that comes in through like their salivary glands, right? Mm-hmm. So how does the poop make it into the bite? Is it just like proximity wise that it winds up there? Yeah. So when the kissing bug bites a human, so there's a bit of a wound, and then so if they can defecate within a second or two, the poop will, and then also, so when a human or an animal will kind of scratch, and then the poop will get into the wound. Sure. So that's how it works. Okay, interesting. Mm-hmm. And why are they called kissing bugs?
So they typically bite kind of like a thin membrane, so like around your mouth, sometimes around your eye. So it kind of got the common name of kissing bugs.
Nice, yeah.
A little kiss on your face.
And I think if I remember from what I learned in entomology, they tend to do that at night, right? Is that another, so while you're sleeping kind of thing as well?
Yeah, and then so they are attracted to light, so especially if you have a light on at night, they'll be flying around, and then they're like, oh, there's probably going to be, people inside, and they'll go in and then bite humans, or also animals. They feed on all vertebrates.
Oh, okay, so is this disease something that any vertebrate animal can get?
So mammals can kind of contract Chagas disease, so various symptoms depending on the mammal. Yeah.
Okay, and how does it manifest in people? What are the symptoms of what is it, Chagas disease from kissing bugs? Okay.
Yeah, so there's kind of two stages. So you have an acute stage where you don't really get symptoms, and also a lot of people don't realize they have Chagas disease, unfortunately. And then it can kind of lay dormant for up to 20 or so years, and then about 30% of people who are infected with Chagas disease, it'll kind of manifest in heart failure, and that's a pretty big cause of heart disease in Latin America.
Wow.
So way after the fact, so it's a little hidden in that sense.
I didn't realize it could lay dormant for so long. That's really upsetting to think about, that you have no idea you have this disease that could kill you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's fun. Goodness. So what specifically are you looking at with the relationship between this disease and people and the insects?
Sure. So my lab, so we look at kind of the intersection of land use change and then also disease transmission. So formerly my PI, my advisor, she has looked at across a deforestation gradient, and then seen how the number of bugs change depending on how much forest is in the area, as well as how many of these bugs are infected with the parasite that causes Chagas. So I'm kind of taking that framework and then now looking at the gut bacteria of it. So across this gradient, so from urban where there's not a lot of trees all the way up into a forest, and I want to understand the different bacterial patterns that we're seeing, and then if that can, the different patterns we're seeing, if that facilitates the ability for the bug to contract the parasite and for the parasite to kind of stay in the bug and then also get passed on. So seeing how deforestation affects potential transmission by looking at the gut bacteria.
Interesting. Okay, so are these insects, do they live in the forest, or do they actually human-caused disturbances?
So there's about 140 different species. So there are a lot, or at least ones that we know that can spread Chagas disease of these kissing bugs throughout Latin America. So the species that we're looking at, so they are found in palm trees, up in the crowns of palm trees. But of course, a lot of houses have palm trees near them, and especially if there's not a lot of animals up in the palm crown, they'll go looking for humans, and then we'll kind of go into houses. Yeah, and then you have other species and that will kind of like hang out in like the roofs of houses. So the ones we study are mostly found in palm trees, but then other kissing bugs can be found in actual houses.
Interesting. So they've actually adapted to human structures.
Right. Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So do you have any results that you can share about how the disturbance gradient affects the gut bacteria?
Yeah, so we've looked, so I only have some preliminary results. So we have seen differences in the gut bacteria of these bugs found along different palm tree kind of these microhabitats. So we're looking at, so in like pastures, which is going to be fewer trees and then near like more, kind of like structures versus kind of like more forested areas. So we are seeing in, so forests that have some urban development, but it is pretty, pretty heavily forested. And we're seeing that their diversity, so the number of bacteria as well as the different types of bacteria we're seeing is greater diversity. So, and again, we don't really know what that means, but so I can't say much about that. But we are seeing a difference along the, like where the palm trees are found, so kind of like the whole habitat there, and then as well as some regional differences, which is probably the most exciting. So we sampled kind of like around the Panama Canal. And then so those bugs were more similar to each other kind of around the canal. But then when we sampled some bugs that were found kind of in a more mountainous area, not as many people, about like it was like a 6-hour drive away from the canal. And then so also, again, so I can only speak to diversity, and I'm not sure what that means, but there are clear differences. And then so that's potentially, the different animals that the bugs are feeding on, is different. And then also to maybe even proximity to, maybe humans, and then also just environmental parameters. So like, how much rain is here? What's the elevation? Like what is what does this region look like? It is very different from like around the canal, which is more developed.
Sure.
So again, we don't know what it means yet, but it is exciting to see that there are differences, and now we're going to try to tease apart what those, like what that means, and what does that potentially mean for transmission, for people getting Chagas disease.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a big complicated network of how all of these things interact, but that's like the best thing about ecology, right? Is that's what we do. We look at all of these really complicated interactions and try to figure out if you pull on this string, what happens, right? Yeah, very cool. So does your research include a lot of field work?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Tell us about your field work.
Certainly. So I was in Panama last summer. So I was only there for about 3 weeks, but so I will be going back. will probably be in Panama sometime in September, so probably in the next month. But yeah, and I was fortunate to work with my lab mate who spent, she spent like a whole year like nonstop in Panama. Wow. So I was able to kind of hop on to what she was doing. But yeah, so, we would go out into the field, and ahead of time we would kind of have an idea of where we wanted to collect, like, okay, how many houses are around here, what, again, that kind of like habitat I talked about in terms of, what does a palm tree look like, how much dead branches are on it, how many animals are potentially in the palm tree, that could all kind of, play a role into the, the different bacteria that we're finding. So we pick a palm tree, and then so we have this long pole. So we have these traps that we make. So that's what I should start with. So we have these traps. We call them Neuro Traps. It's just the person who created them years ago. But so it's basically the T end of a PVC pipe. Okay. And then we have a live mouse. So again, these bugs, they feed on live vertebrates. We need to attract them somehow.
Use live
we do. We have to use live mice.
That's really
if it was anything else, they would not come up to the trap.
Okay.
So we put a live mouse in the middle of this T, like part of the PVC pipe, and then we add some grates to it just so the mouse can't get out. And then also we put like a wet cotton ball in it and some food for the mice so that they're taken care of as much as we can.
The idea is that you don't want the mouse to die.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we have this trap, and then we put double stick tape all over the trap, and then we have this long pole, and then so that's how so these palm trees are, up to like 12 feet or so. So we have to try to get into the crown of the palm tree. So we have a trap with sticky tape on it and then some string to kind of just latch onto our pole. And then we just, it takes a lot of practice. It took me a while to get it because it's like, the pole is, 8+ feet long, trying to deal with that. And then so the idea is that we're gonna get it into kind of the center of the crown of this palm tree. And I talked about kind of like, so dead matter, dead materials. So again, just like dead plant material that the bugs also like to kind of like live in. And probably also to avoid predators that eat them. Yeah, so we try to like stick it up where we think they'll be best found that are kind of hanging out in the palm tree. And then we wait at least 24 hours and then we'll come back and then take the traps out and then see how many bugs. So presumably, the bugs can sense the CO2 coming off of the mouse. We'll be like, oh, like this is food. Yeah. And then we'll get stuck on the double stick tape. Okay. And then so we'll collect the traps and then pull off the bugs.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty fun. A little tedious, especially when you're trying to, climb to these various palm trees, or sometimes they're on like a hill or like right by someone's house. And that's another thing. So this was mostly my lab mate because she had been working so long in Panama, but we would have to get permission from the Panamanians to go into their backyards. And just to see if we can, test their, trees for bugs.
Yeah. And how does that work out? Like, are people interested in what you do and like willing to help because you're trying to research a disease that affects them?
Yeah. I mean, if we're able to contact them if they're in town, it's pretty easy to get their permission. So in Panama, they refer to them as chinches, which is generally like, bug in Spanish, but I know chinches for them are specifically these kissing bugs. So we're like, oh, we're testing for chinches. They're like, oh, yeah. They're like, they want us to, find them and find out if they need to, potentially call an exterminator and try to get them eradicated. Because again, they know that they can get Chagas disease from these chinches and they don't want them in there. So we're like, oh yeah, like find out if we have any in our palm trees.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like when we have to do research that's like directly interacting with our stakeholders or the land users. Yeah. You also mentioned predators. So it sounds like there might be some good news in that there's something that eats these bugs. Yeah. So what is the sort of like network around them?
So I can't 100% speak to this, but my lab mate, so her entire dissertation is looking at, the potential predators that are eating the bugs. So we do know that some small mammals are feeding on the bugs. So there's a lot of sloths that are found in the palm trees, as well as there's a lot of small mammals that are found in the palm trees. And then so, we've seen them kind of picking off some of the bugs, and then also some larger invertebrates. So I think some spiders, we think. So there's not a lot of research on what actually is eating these bugs. And when you put them in a lab, that doesn't tell you much. So we think that there's a lot of different spider species in the palm tree. So we think the larger ones can eat them certainly.
Okay, interesting. So what is your favorite thing about doing your field work?
Certainly, I had a lot of time trying to get the traps into the palms. Yeah, so it was surprisingly, it was harder than I thought it would be. I was surprised there. But yeah, so just kind of, like navigating that and trying to get it in. And then also just, you cross your fingers and say like, all right, we'll see what happens in 24 hours. So oftentimes we maybe pulled, 1 or 2 from a single palm tree. But then other times we got a lot. So that was exciting. And then also too, like how old were the bugs? We have a lot of adults, a lot of kind of smaller ones. So I don't have a ton of, terrestrial, so like, working on land in terms of field work. So it was just fun to kind of be like, yeah, I don't know what we're going to find in this palm tree, but we'll see.
It's like a fun scavenger hunt.
Yeah, because there's not much else you can do.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, that's the, trapping for insects is just always a crapshoot, right? You could wind up with more than you can count or nothing because they're so tiny it's hard to figure out.
And then all the other bugs you would find. So again, I mentioned my lab mate, Christina, so she's trying to find find out all the different, like insects, and other invertebrates that are found in the palm trees. So she was collecting them all the time. So it'd be like, oh, like I learned so many new, tropical spider species and just kind of recognizing all these animals that I'm not even interested in studying, but that I would see probably sometimes more often than the kissing bugs. So
that's cool. So let's take it back a little bit now and talk about your journey to where you are right now. So how did you decide to become a scientist, period, but also how did you decide to go to grad school?
Yeah, so I guess the simplest answer is that when I was younger, I just, was interested in science. So I grew up in San Diego, California. So fortunately, I was really close to the beach. So we would go to the beach and like look at the intertides, and then like, oh, like there's sea stars, there's, like urchins. And then also the San Diego Zoo is incredible. So again, it was like a really easy summer thing for us to do. My mom's a teacher, so she had the summers off as well as us. So we had a membership, we would go almost every week. We're like, yeah, like where else can you take a 6-year-old? Yeah. So I just was interested in particularly wildlife, but just generally, just kind of like some science. And then in college, I was a biology major. I went to a small University of Redlands, in kind of like east of Los Angeles. So I got introduced to actually marine ecology randomly. I thought I wanted to go to med school. I was like, yeah, I guess science means med school. I did not realize ecology was a thing for a while. So I was like, okay, I'll do med school. I do well on my biology tests. And then I took a marine ecology class and I was like, oh, but wait, I love the ocean. And medical doctors don't work in the ocean.
No.
So I think so particularly in that class, so I was a junior in college, so maybe 20, and then just realizing that, oh, I could love science, love the ocean, and do something with this. And then so from there, I actually did some volunteer work with a professor at my university, and we actually studied gray whales. So again, a fortunate thing about being, on the California coast is that it was an hour drive to, like the beaches of LA. So we did some work studying the respiration rates of gray whales, and then seeing how whale watching boats affected how often they would come up to breathe, because they don't want to be around us, and especially in the summer times there's a lot of whale watching boats. So we're trying to see of how much just human presence was affecting their respiration rates, and then also looking during other times of the year when there weren't as many people out there. So I got interested in kind of like marine mammal stuff, marine mammal behavior. I actually spent a few months in Italy after college, and then that was studying bottlenose dolphin behavior, and then in relation to there was a fish farm really close to the coast, so we were looking at how often the dolphins would go up and try to feed out of the fish farm instead of catching like wild fish. So I was like, I was all in on, especially non-medical science. I was all in on kind of like this behavior ecology stuff, marine mammals. But then once I finished with Italy, I moved back to San Diego with my family. And then I actually worked with at a fish hatchery in San Diego. So it's kind of like nonprofit end of SeaWorld. So they do a lot of conservation research. Okay. So there we were growing fish and putting them back into the ocean, white sea bass. Nice. So again, I was like, this is really cool. And I was like, and that got me to, more research, less behavior stuff, but just kind of like looking at different research stuff. And then before I figured out that I want to go back to school, I was kind of like, what am I doing? I did some behavior stuff, and then now I'm like growing fish. Yeah. I was like, I was like mostly just trying to like find something to do to put on my resume, and again, just explore, just different avenues. And then I started volunteering at the San Diego Zoo, and that's kind of was probably the biggest thing and kind of, I guess, journey to where I am now. So they have I think it's wildlife disease lab at the San Diego Zoo. They have a whole conservation institute, and then so there, of course, they want to see what potential diseases could the animals get. They had a big kind of recirculating water system to kind of conserve water, of course, but also too they want to make sure it's clean for the animals when they kind of sterilize the water. So we were going through. So we did this for about a year. collected water, again, I was like, right, so I got to be really close to all these like wild animals they had at the zoo, collected water, but that's what got me into thinking about like diseases. So that kind of like, so I changed course. So I haven't worked with aquatic animals since, but I got focused on diseases. I was like, this is really cool. And thinking about kind of like wildlife and how, diseases impact wildlife. And then also too, and how humans can impact, like diseases and wildlife. So I guess long story short is that in terms of grad school, I was like, I'm really into this. I'm getting really into research. And I think this is the next step for me, and I think just, I still don't really know what I want to do with my life career-wise. But I knew that I wanted to do a lot more research and also to, kind of be in charge of research and kind of like make my own questions. So in that sense, like I know I need at least a master's and then, certainly a PhD to like have my own lab and kind of like lead, kind of these bigger kind of ideas and investigations. So I did a 1-year master's at Tulane University, actually here in New Orleans. So that was in ecology and evolutionary biology. Okay. So that got me a lot of the academic, so my background's biology, so I was like, okay, now let me get more academic knowledge in like ecology and evolution. And then there I worked in a lab where we studied fungi that are found inside of plants. So we work with bald cypress trees, which you can find throughout New Orleans. So then you can plate them on some like agar plates, and then the fungi can grow out, and then we're like looking at them, and we wanted to understand the different fungal communities. So just like the different species of fungi that are found depending on if the bald cypress tree is closer to the Gulf of Mexico versus further away. So closer to the Gulf of Mexico, there's more salt water versus when you go further back. So this was kind of looking at, a little bit of like climate change and saying, all right, so when there's more salt in the water, how does that change just the different species of fungi that you find, and potentially that it helps the bald cypress tree survive in saltier waters, or, or maybe like less salty, but certainly if this helps them be able to thrive in these saltier waters that a lot of trees can't.
Interesting.
So that was kind of, yes, I was doing diseases, and then I got into a lab where I wasn't doing diseases, but I knew I was interested in, so now I'm doing like bacterial stuff, so I knew I was interested in microbes and then how human impacts affect different microbial communities that are found in animals or plants, and then how they kind of maybe adapt to it. And so just kind of, so like what are we doing that's affecting the microbes found in plants and animals, and just how are they adapting from there?
That's amazing.
So just my whole story is a little of this, but so then once I finished my master's, I got accepted to the University of Georgia in the Odom School of Ecology, in a new disease ecology program that's really specific on disease ecologists. And then so now I, kind of taking what I've always been interested in, so like wildlife, and then getting into diseases, and then microbes. So now I'm applying all of that with, what I study. So how deforestation affects the gut bacteria of kissing bugs.
That's an amazing, sort of twisty story. Yeah. I like how you even sort of made it back to medicine at the end too. So
I hit everything.
It's a nice thematic story. And we were talking with a friend earlier, and one of the interesting parts of what we do with this series, of course, is talking about the fact that scientists can have all sorts of diverse backgrounds, and that like anybody can and should consider becoming a scientist if that's what they're interested in. So could you talk a little bit more about how the diversity components of your life have affected you as a scientist and you as a grad student? Certainly.
I know, I guess just being a black woman is something that, I've been a black woman my entire life. And particularly in ecology, but certainly across just sciences, that there are not a lot of people of color. So I think just thinking about that, because I never saw too many people, like I never really had science mentors that were of color. it didn't deter me, but it certainly sometimes gets kind of hard when you're going through. You're like, oh, no one in the academy looks like me. Am I supposed to be doing this? So I know just in terms of I want to kind of like forge a path as best I can for people behind me, for the younger kids. So I've been involved in a lot of outreach, both at Tulane and also at University of Georgia, and I find it so rewarding to just look at these like young kids who, like myself, are like, oh yeah, like plants are cool, or like bugs, or even if they think it's gross, they're still interested. And I love I'll bring some kissing bugs to the schools and be like, ew, but then, they won't turn away. Then they'll be like, they keep looking at it, they're like, well, okay. So, and I just love seeing that kind of sparks an interest. And then, like, hey, you have science classes here, like ask your teachers, like when you get into high school, see if you can, even try to come to a lab. There's a lot of labs that like, oh yeah, we can take a senior and let them, kind of like shadow, just get them more interested in, again, research, sciences. Yeah. And then also you can put them in college and again, keep them, taking up ecology, just various science classes. So that's something that, particularly since I've started grad school, I think just getting older and realizing like, hey, like, what am I doing? It's great to do research, but I want to have an impact beyond just my scientific kind of like findings, but also too of like, what can I do? Is there any way that I can, kind of bring people with me?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it sounds like you sort of do this a lot with the school kids you work with, but like, what would you tell your younger self, someone who's starting out in a similar situation to you? Like, what do you want them to know before they start on the path towards becoming a researcher?
I think I would say is embrace your curiosity, and even if there's not a lot of people who look like you, if you can show your enthusiasm for whatever it is, people will certainly accept you, and that it's not. It is, at times it can certainly be kind of like sometimes rough, sometimes tough, just kind of navigating the space where maybe you're the only person who looks like you, but you will find a lot of interest, in different communities, even like, your white counterparts. But, if everyone's interested in disease ecology, you can kind of forge that, those like similarities, and then kind of even like help each other out to get ahead, even if you are the only one who's like brown or black. So I would say is that, so embrace your curiosity, and then also just kind of like forge your own path. And you will certainly get there. And again, just like, especially with the enthusiasm, people will look at you and be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I want to bring you along with me. Like, especially people who already have paved paths, but then they can bring you along with them, and then you can help forge paths for other people. So, yeah.
I love that idea of bringing people along. And I guess that's probably a pillar of your science communication and outreach stuff, right? So like I said, we met at ComSciCon.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about your science communication.
Sure. So the University of Georgia, so actually specifically in the Odom School of Ecology, we have so it's called EcoReach. So it's really environmental outreach, or like ecology outreach. So it's been around for a while, but it always ebbs and flows because it's always been run by grad students. And as people know, school is, people get busy. So now I'm the new president for this upcoming year. And we're very excited about just kind of making new events. So basically, EcoReach has, certainly in the last 3 years that I've, kind of been at Georgia, so we go to classrooms, and then so we'll bring like small activities, and we'll talk about, a lot of times we'll talk about maybe macroinvertebrates, so just different kind of like water bugs that you can find in streams. Yeah. So there's a lot of streams in Athens, Georgia. So, even if we're in like kind of an urban setting, all the kids have seen a stream. Sure. And then so we can talk about, oh, hey, like when you go to a stream, look at the, maybe like take a hand or like take a bucket and see what kind of bugs, and then so we'll show them and kind of introduce them to like dragonfly larvae or like caddisflies and just different bugs you can find in streams that they can find in their own backyards.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and like and talking about, and then also too talking about, being conscious about conserving water. Like, hey, like, turn off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth, and just little things that, can never be said, too much. So we'll bring it to them. So both like science stuff, and then also to just general environmental, just issues and, kind of challenges that just we as people, need to work on. So we go to classrooms, and then also we go to a lot of festivals. So fortunately, Athens does have a lot of, they have like a water festival we're going to in a few weeks. Yeah, so it's just like kids will run around and, run around and then talk about, different like water conservation practices. We usually talk about, again, we have a lot of stream ecologists, so we talk a lot, if you can tell, we talk a lot about, again, these kind of like water bugs and just getting, kids and their parents like interested in water and interested in, aquatic, systems and animals. And then also we do some events with Boy Scouts. So there's a really cool day. I think it's like a Vansorama, so they can earn like an entire merit badge in a single day.
Yeah.
So we did the environmental section. So it's a whole day. We'll talk about, a little bit the history of ecology. We'll take them around all the streams in Athens and kind of talk about, various pollutants. Athens is I guess University of Georgia is a big football school. So we talk a lot about, when people bring their big old RVs and are just like dumping into the streams, and then especially if you have, your like middle school kid tells your parents, hey, mom and dad, you shouldn't be doing that. It'll probably go even further than what some like scientist or some person in the public would be like, hey, don't dump. They're like, eh. So again, just kind of getting kids excited about it. So we do Boy Scouts, and then also we're trying to start a program and focusing on like careers in ecology and going to the schools and just letting them know, like, hey, if you want to, you can go to school and go to college and be an ecologist, or you don't even have to do that if you want to like work in a lab, and just like various avenues where you can still be doing science at any level. Middle school, high school, with or
for life.
Exactly, yeah, with or without a college degree, but just if you're interested, if science and the environment interests you, there's ways to get involved, and then so we like to talk to the kids about that.
That's fantastic. I love outreach and engagement programs like that. That sounds like a lot of fun. Is there anything else that you want to tell people about what you do and who you are?
You know what? Yeah. So, as I've said a lot about, I'm a scientist, I'm an ecologist, but also, I grew up dancing and playing music. So that's kind of like so I have a whole like artistic side, which certainly getting through grad school is great because, I need like a creative outlet. Otherwise, I just get stressed out and I'm like, shaking just from stress. So just of all the things I need to do. So I'm actually in a dance company in Athens. And it's great. So we have performances a couple times a year. I get to, at the end of a long day, I'll go and like take an hour of dance, and it's wonderful and it makes me so happy. And then also I don't play as much, but I grew up playing the cello. So I was in orchestra for maybe like 10 years, like growing up, and then also I have a music minor in like cello performance from college.
That's cool.
Yeah, I was like, okay, why not? I was like, I'll play cello. So that's also been like a great creative outlet. And then I'm trying to, keep that up. Being Athens, there is a symphony orchestra. So I'm seeing, without trying to commit to too much, but I'm hoping that I can, even stop in every now and then and just play my cello. So it's. Yeah, so I think just, I'm more than a scientist, and it's just kind of cool to, see the different aspects of people. So I'm a scientist and an artist.
That's fantastic. I love that. Yeah, we have hobbies outside of doing our science.
Yep.
Yeah. So you said you're partway through your PhD. Do you have any thoughts on what you want to do with the rest of that, or
Sure.
what you want to do after that?
So I am still trying to figure out what I want to do after I get my PhD. I do know is that, so once I finish my PhD, I don't think I want to stay in academia and stay in an institution and become a professor. More likely, I think I want to go into government.
Okay.
So I think I want to go into government. There's a few agencies. So the U.S. Geological Survey. So I think that'd be really cool. They do a lot with wildlife diseases. I'm truly interested in focusing on I don't really have like a, I don't need to stay with insects. I just want to focus on wildlife and diseases and how, humans are shaping just disease transmission between animals and also between animals and humans.
There's certainly a lot of those kind of questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, so, that, or also too, maybe the Smithsonian. I know they do a lot of cool work with conservation, and then I know there are some kind of disease aspects there, certainly. And actually, for my PhD program, we're required to do an externship, something. So I'll probably be doing something next summer, and I've been thinking about spending some time at the Smithsonian, and just getting getting my feet wet to see is this something I want to do. So fortunately, even though it's a requirement, I'm glad that kind of my advisor and my program are allowing me to have that time.
Yeah.
Or I guess mandating the time to do it, just so that I can, so that before I graduate, I have a kind of a better idea, because it's possible that, maybe I don't want to go into government, and then I can kind of start thinking about other things.
Yeah, it's nice that they sort of guide you to having some of those extra experiences,
right,
so that you're better equipped to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of, so I'm still thinking, I have, maybe about 3 years left of my PhD. But so hopefully next summer, or whenever I work at maybe the Smithsonian. Also too, I wouldn't mind if I went back to San Diego for my externship and, did something with the San Diego Zoo, kind of on a more professional setting instead of me as a volunteer. So we'll see. But again, so that would be an NGO, so nonprofit there, non-government organization. So, again, of do I like the institution of government, or non-government organizations, and just kind of, again, just get my feet wet and see what I'll do. But I don't know. I'm also it's a little nerve-wracking to not know what you want to do, but also at the same time, I know that there's a lot of things that I would be interested in. So that kind of gives me a lot of different choices. If one path doesn't work, it's not my, be all end all. Be okay, well then maybe let me try something else. Yeah. So
nice to be flexible.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I want to thank you, Kaylee, so much for talking with us. You had a lot of really fun things to talk about, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And if you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.